you, Jess. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Winton, Truck Assist Winton SuperSprint, Event 6, Virgin Australia Supercars Championship. We've completed the co-driver session earlier in the day, and now our first and only practice session for the day, which has a significance towards Armour All qualifying, and then we'll have the three-part elimination qualifying, moving on to race 13 this afternoon for 40 laps and 120 kilometres of racing around here. Big thunderstorm went through at about 10 o'clock last night, lasted for a couple of hours. Outfield is very wet here at the moment, and there's been 1 or 2 showers this morning. The question on everybody's lips, will it rain? I think the answer to that is yes. Where it will and when it will is really the question, because depending on where you are in this basin, some parts are dry and blazed in sunshine at the moment, and other parts are quite wet. And we've got 30 minutes now to answer that question from a supercar perspective. We've got all the cars going out there, including a wild card this weekend for young Jack Smith, who's appearing again for Brad Jones Racing. All right, let's have a look at our location, 3 kilometres around Winton, thanks to Virgin Australia. It's 12 corners, clockwise in direction, and this particular track is quite slow, but don't let the numbers frighten you. So only 136 odd kilometres an hour for an average speed around here. Top speed's 225. You can see by the throttle percentage, they don't get wide open too often, so it means that the cars are dancing in a sliding state for an awful lot of the lap. But what it does do year on year is it does produce some tremendous racing. It also produces random results. That stuff we really enjoy. Turn 1 and 2, right there at turn 2 is where Craig Lowndes is going to be joining us in this session. We'll get an update from him. He was the fastest in practice for the co-drivers early on. You run down a hill into turn 4, very easy to run wide there, and if you do, the outside wall's quite close. This is the quickest corner on the racetrack at turn 5, 140 kilometres an hour at its slowest point. There's a big curb on the right at turn 6 that flies the cars, but they must land and hit the apex at turn 7, which is quite slow. Now, all this stuff is second gear. It's all in the 65, 70, 75 kilometre an hour range. Out of 9 down to 10, which is opposite the pit lane. There's quite violent Vallelunga serrated curb on the outside of turn 10. There's another one at turn 11 as well, and another at turn 12. So one of the things that also happens at this location is that it on occasion does hurt gearboxes and transaxles and related equipment. That's the picture from the weather standpoint at the moment. Looking across turns 1 and 2, depending on where you look, there's a bit of everything. Some blue sky, some scattered cloud, and some pretty threatening stuff in varying directions. And we're quite close to the Victorian high country here, and they are talking today snow above 1,700 metres. Tomorrow they're saying snow above 1,200 metres, and we've already had some pretty wild weather. Okay, let's have a bit of a stop, pause, think, where are we at with this championship at the moment? Let's join the championship leader, Scott McLaughlin. He's got a 142-point cushion. Year-to-date stats are pretty impressive. 8 poles and 8 wins. 10 times he stood on the podium. His form at Winton's a curiosity because he's had a win here, probably expected in the recent past, but he's also had 5 Armour All pole positions, and that tells us when you look at those numbers that the conversion is somewhat weird. Last year, pole position both days, should have been able to march on from that, but that didn't happen. He was 5th on Saturday. He did come home in 3rd on Sunday, and in fact it was Rick Kelly that muscled by him on a coolish Saturday afternoon last year, and the tyres cooled out after a safety car and he didn't recover. This is his teammate Fabian Coulthard, a winner in Western Australia, 2nd in the championship. His stats so far this year, a pole, a couple of wins, 6 times he's been able to visit the Virgin Australia podium. Here at Winton, he's got form, and remember that prior to driving for Dick Johnson Racing Team Penske as he runs wide at turn 10, he was a driver for Brad Jones Racing, who've got a lot of experience at this location. So he's had a couple of wins, couple of poles. Last year he was 4th on Saturday, but his drive on Sunday was really beautiful. He had big pressure from Shane van Gisbergen that was chasing hard, but in the end he prevailed. And here is Shane with the sunglasses on, full spy mode. So 3rd in the championship, year-to-date a pole and a win, 4 podiums, but consistency, apart from the Australian Grand Prix, which was a bit of a shocker for him, put him in good stead last time out in Western Australia. They weren't headline performances for Shane, but they were solid, and it really helped his points cause, particularly because Chaz Mostert had a shocker and dropped a couple of spots down in the championship. This is the view from turn 2. Craig Lowndes is down there. We're going to get to him very shortly. That was his right ear. And he was fastest in the co-driver session. Mark Scaife joins us. David Reynolds has been testing here, and he needs to, because for last year, it was a downer weekend, wasn't it? It was a shocker.
It was a shocker. But he's got normally good pace. He drives the car very well. We often talk about his prowess in varying conditions, and especially at a place like Bathurst. Remember that great pole lap at Bathurst in the rain. Oh, disappearing car on the right-hand side there. Is that Whincup or Van Gisbergen going off? Couldn't pick up who it was. Just have a look on our tracker.
97.
97. So Van Gisbergen off. There's young Jack Smith, who's our wild card for the weekend. He's off down at turn 1, and that will not be the only car for the weekend down there. That's a spot that's very easy to make a mistake over the little rise in the braking area, and this is Van Gisbergen on board. Just understeer off the road, and you can see there just no ability to keep it on that asphalt surface, and as soon as you just dip one wheel off, the reaction of the car, low grip, straight out to the right-hand side. Grant McPherson having a look there, and this is Chaz Mostert. Mostert likes these conditions normally. He's very good. He's currently the fastest, and he's always had good form at this place. He's currently 5th in the championship, Coppo.
Had a win here in 2015, but 4 poles to your point. The last one of those was 2016. Now, eagle eye down there at turn 2 to catch all the sliding action and pick up on all the vibe and the balance and what's going on is Craig Lowndes. Good morning again, Mr. Lowndes. Nice job in the co-driver session this morning.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. But it's you mentioned Chaz Mostert, the fastest at the moment. He's the only one that is really using that turn 1 curve, and the car looks good. Well, as we see, Tim.
Macca, yep.
Sorry, that's Macca. I'm too used to the old school liveries, but yeah, Chaz Mostert looks really good through here. The Nissan guys. Oh, sorry, Jacob. Gary Jacobs going off. Yeah, it's all happening down here, but yeah, Chaz is the only one that's using the inside of turn 1, and as I said, the car looks good.
Sometimes, Lancey, it's weird, isn't it? You think using an inside curb would hurt you in the rain, but sometimes what it does, it actually generates more grip because it fires the car up onto 2 wheels and actually has more load on the outer of the tyre and generates some grip out of it.
Well, it does, Scafey, and I think that I saw Jamie try to use in that last lap, and the car really spat off the curb. As I can see him coming in now, he's just had a little bit of a lock-up. He's ran wide on the entry, and you hear the flare-up of the rear tyres as they go over this crest, just trying to get traction. But as again, Chaz, no wheel spin. He looks like he's looking pretty comfortable.
He had a shocker here last year. I mean, they really had a battle on their hands. When I say a shocker, it was kind of a midfield result, but by the standards that they've set, which have been pretty high here for that group, it was a difficult one for him. He had a race here a few years ago in one of the Pepsi-coloured cars that was shot to pieces until he got it all wrong down there at turn 4 and backed it up on the wall. But I fully expect that he's going to be a contender through the balance of the year. That engine issue that they had in Western Australia has certainly plummeted down. There's the natural enemy of a championship result, the way things are configured in the modern era, is it did not finish. As soon as you get a 0, that's what hurts. You can have a bad weekend and not so many points, but a 0 really kills you. Here's the replayer down at 1. Now, you've been conducting a small survey. Pollsters are not having a good time in the last 7 days, so tell me how you're going with your polling about who uses or doesn't use the curb at turn 1.
Well, basically, pretty much all of us are saying that we would on our preferred. Doesn't always land that way, but on our preferred option is definitely to hit the curb at turn 1. And what Chaz does there is when you watch the car and the dynamic of it, we were watching when Craig Lowndes was explaining it before, it actually holds the car tighter. So it makes it easier to get through turn 2. So by sacrificing the road from the exit of turn 1, holding the car to the left, makes the open radius of turn 2 better, and therefore the exit out of 2 and up and over the hill is improved. So that's half the technique. We're on board now with Will Davison. Will used to smash the car over this curve. We'll see whether he uses it now. Just a little rise on the brakes. Just watch whether he uses it now. No, he missed it. He may not have meant to there.
And sometimes in these conditions, that's a deliberate ploy. He's 7th in the championship so far this year. Earlier in the game, he was 4th right at the top of the championship season. He's had a win here back in 2008 and the front row start in 2012, 11th and 13th last year. This is the Milwaukee Racing Ford Mustang. He's had a lot of outings at this racetrack. Only ever converted to 1 podium though, ironically, but a lot of top 5 and top 10 results. So 15 times he's been in the top 10 as we go back to Chaz, position number 1 at the moment, 32.7. And that plays against the numbers that we expect to see. Remember, it was resurfaced here in 2016, and so that weekend the speeds for racing, for qualifying and for practice were somewhat off the regular scale. But the sort of numbers that you expect to see from the records that we've witnessed here in the past, Coulthard a 19.7 for the lap record, Mostert an 18.7 on screen for the quali record, and Mark Winterbottom practice record a 19 flat. They were all done several years ago. Now, when you look at a 32 out there, it gives you an idea of just how much water's on the road. That'll take a little bit of a while to...
He's going to come up again. That's a good time. 32.2. He's got 6/10. Now watch this. When he hits the curb, he holds it hard left, and that makes the run through turn 2 way better. The flow of the car, less turnings to do, more throttle on exit, faster exit speed. So all of the things that come from the approach at turn 1 help turn 2.
He drops it in the gutter effectively, actually straddles that curbing. Adam DeBore's engineer. Here we go, we'll have a look at the replay. So watch that front left wheel. It actually parks it into the green there, which has been backfilled, so there's not dirt there anymore. It doesn't drag all the junk onto the road. So he hops it, that's his engineer. He's had a busy time. His young guy's into karting, so we think that Adam might get a little breather from motor racing because we think of life through a supercar prism. But he's been running around in the kart last weekend in Merimbula, where Adam lives. South coast of New South Wales, as Tim Slade comes in, who had great success here several years ago in the Freightliner car, and we're picking up Scotty McLaughlin at turn 9. Mark Larkham.
Yeah, we just saw Shane Van Gisbergen with those sunglasses on. The backstory to that is it was his birthday last weekend, and apparently there's a bit of hoo-ha at Hampton Downs with all the boys over there in the dust. Must have been doing a bit of rallying. You'll probably find a photo online somewhere. He's got some dust in his eye, and that'll just give him a little bit of relief.
He was channeling Jim Richards, who used to spend a bit of time with sunglasses on from time to time. Glenn Seaton did, who's actually here this weekend from time to time, but they're off now. So that's updating the situation with him. I expect in these conditions that he'll be a factor if they stay when we get into Armour or qualifying. Van Gisbergen, his drive on Sunday here was beautiful last year. Mostert, by the way, has just jumped into the ones, 31.6. He's got more than 3/4 of a second over Scott McLaughlin. So it's Mostert, McLaughlin, Waters, Coulthard, Ludo in the bunker at Shell V Power Racing. And Lee Holdsworth just moved up 9 spots into 4th position. New livery this weekend for car 8 for Nick Percat. Honda Motorcycles backing that car. David Reynolds is 8th. Mostert's pressing on here because his next sector split in sector 1 is better than anybody else. So he's obviously got a car that's well matched at the moment. And as it's continuing to build temperature and the drier groove is appearing on the racetrack, he's making hay while the little bit of sunshine's out there at the moment. Craig Lowndes back down there at turn 2. Observations, please.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. Yes, you're right. The sun's just trying to peer through the cloud at the moment, which is making the track dry out, and you can just start to see a grey groove. A lot more cars using the turn 1 curb. But yeah, you're right about the Chaz Mostert. I'm not sure about his lap times, but definitely in these conditions, the sun's just about to peer out now. That you can see the track drying out. A lot of the guys, Tim Slade, Jamie Whincup, having a big understeer on the second part of that turn 2, which is really hindering them up over in the turn 3. But definitely these times are going to fall as this session goes on.
Hey, Lounsey, I was just interested because Mostert was the most aggressive over there. He's fastest by a mile. He's almost a second faster than the next car. I'm surprised there's not a lot more people using way more curb there.
Well, it's interesting now that he's just got by Jamie. So Jamie, I'm no doubt, will want to follow him now, see where he's going and where he's getting the gains out of this lap time. But he's been aggressive, as you said, Scavey, from the start. So, you know, he's very confident and comfortable. You know, Fabian, Scotty McLaughlin, Will, not touching this curb at all, but Chaz has been monstering it all session.
One of the other interesting things about the way this corner gets attacked, different drivers have got different theories, and I know you used to look at Craig's data down there, is whether or not you rush hard at 1, or do you just sacrifice a little bit to keep the car further to the left in the transition between 1 and 2 so that you can get to a higher percentage throttle earlier for the ramp run up the hill at 2. Yep. If you can get it to a point where you can get the car stopped as late as you dare into 1, turn it, hug to the left, and then only make 1 throttle application going up the hill, so you hit it and you progress it to 100% rather than stitching the throttle up the way there, you'll get a better exit speed, which will give you a better terminal speed in the next short shoot.
exactly. So there's two techniques. One is how much curb do you use to get the initial grip from the car, but when you sacrifice turn one so much, as what you're explaining, it actually gives you such a benefit out of turn two. So that's a really good job. James Golding's come up. He's the fastest Commodore up into third. Great job.
And they're putting a slick tyre, I understand, on Scott McLaughlin's car. I was watching Golding's lap before and I saw him pop up at the bottom of the tree. That's a nice job. So 31.4 is the number for Chaz Mostert. His teammate Cam Waters has all but repeated that time. There's a 100th of a second between them. Golding next, as Mark pointed out. Then Fabian Coulthard's just done a very impressive sector split, but come back to the lane. So I reckon what they've done is said, get in, get slicks. Forget about trying to press on and break lap records on wets. It'll quickly become irrelevant if that sun that Craig was discussing a moment ago genuinely peeks through and stays there.
And Simona, man of the match, because she's actually the only one at the moment on a slick tyre out there. Oh, she gets a little compliment there from Nick Percat. What was Nick doing there?
No, but it looked a bit uncomfortable between them, but he wouldn't have been aware at the time that Simona was using a slick CL.
Yeah, look, it's one of those things, if you're going to get onto a slick, as you guys said, you want to get on one early because you want to get that tyre temp into them as quickly as you can, but this track is definitely drying out. The sun has disappeared for a little moment, but there's definitely no rain for the rest of this season. But again, if you're on a wet weather tyre, the tyre's now going to build up, and you've got to be really careful you don't over-temperature the wet. But it's going to be great to see how these guys, and Scotty McLaughlin, now get to turn on this slick.
Now we're going to see some pretty impressive numbers come the next couple of laps, because we've got 24 minutes remaining in this session. Remember, this is a longer one because of the single session, and this is Nick Percat on a wet tyre and Simona on a slick tyre down at turn 10, and I doubt whether Simona would have enjoyed that. We'll see whether we can get the onboard view of life from her perspective, and so she's had to correct that little nudge in the rear. And yeah, thanks Nick. Now, Mark Winterbottom, meantime, has done a 30.9 Todd Kelly in the Nissan garage for Kelly Motorsport. Dylan Talabani in the foreground there is the engineer for Andre Heimgartner. Had a great year so far on that wonderful podium at Phillip Island for him. So Frosty's the man in the Irwin car at present. Stephen Richards is going to drive that car later in the year in the endurance races in the Pertec Enduro Cup. He had a run in it this morning. Percat's just jumped up 10 spots into third. This is going to look like the stock market, looking up at the board and seeing all the numbers tumble here at the moment, because the timing screen, if it stays with a drying groove out there, then we're going to see a lot of people just punching up numbers. In fact, the whole screen at the moment is all but lit up with green for personal bests. Does it stay that way? Craig was saying before that it looks like that it might. The wind generally from a westerly direction here. That's where we need to look for the weather. And Winterbottom further improves the mark. In fact, he's the first of them that gets into the top 20s. 29.07. Charlie Schwerkolt's the owner of that team. He's invested large in 2019. New car, 2 new drivers, knew everything in his approach. And Gisbergen's sitting in 14th at the moment. And I'm just looking down the list, Mark, at those that have got super soft against their names, which is triggered by the switch in the car. So sometimes you've got to be careful there, depending on whether the drivers are tardy and don't get the message to change the lighting. But Winterbottom and Stanaway now 1 and 2 on a slick tyre. And then there's probably still the best part of 3/4 of the field that are on the wet.
Yeah, look, Neil, I think that if you can pan in, there's definitely a dry line appearing out of 1 into 2. So if you're not on a slick tyre now, you need to get in. If I was out there now, I'd be yelling for a slick tyre, because it's going to take a number of laps to get the temperature into them, but there's definitely drying out. People are starting to use this curve a lot more.
Yeah, you might need some sunblock out there if it keeps up at this rate.
Lousy, get your hat.
I'll be ready to jump back. It might take me long to run back.
Yeah, exactly. So there's going to be some action. Now, remember, with our qualifying format too, the end of this session is quite important. You need to be in the top 10. You missed Q1, so you get a free kick. If you're in the top 10 at the end of this session, you go straight into Q2. So there'll be some activity at the end of this, and if it does dry out, there'll be teams chucking new tyres at these cars. So Winterbottom, who has just gone slightly faster again, 28.6. Richie Stanaway has done the fastest first sector. He's currently second. Nick Percat, James Courtney, Tim Slade, Chaz Mostert, Cam Waters, Will Davison, Simona Di Silvestro. Great job. So the first of the cars to get onto the slick tyre, she's currently 9th.
So I just went back, look at some data from yesteryear to see where we think the switchover is between a wet and a dry tyre in reality. And it's about the zone where we are now,
okay,
which
Frosty,
no
still
surprise.
Still P1. The pressure's starting to really come up, but let's just keep monitoring, and you advise when we need the fresh set of tyres.
It's Phil Keating background conversation with Mark Winterbottom. So 27.5 is what we've actually written down from a data standpoint. McLaughlin's just jumped up, and in fact, so has Simona Di Silvestro's come up into 3rd. So the groove is evident there, but there are just enough other places around the track, which is typical here. It often is a bit misleading because it looks that way off the corner because the rears buzz up.
Yep.
They make friction, and therefore temperature. Jack Smith pointing in the wrong direction down here. Actually, no, he just parked it up.
Yeah. Yep.
So he's just waiting, showing some courtesy for the join out of the pit lane back onto the racetrack. But in the places where the tyre doesn't generate as much friction, it's wetter. And that's where you've got to be really careful, because you can be lulled into thinking, okay, there's reasonable security beneath the car in certain spots around here, and then all of a sudden you fire in and you stand on the brake pedal and you don't have anything like the corresponding grip.
Well, and when you miss those tram tracks, those two little grooves that are dry, when you miss them, you end up on the outside of the road, which is wet. You're pretty much straight off the road. So Mark Winterbottom, who has stayed on that wet tyre, he's continuing to improve the time of the 27.4. So we're really seeing what is the real crossover of wet to dry. We often talk about what that crossover number is, and now we're seeing it because people on a slick tyre are going faster. So a 27.1 for Whincup, a 27.1 for McLaughlin. That's a great indication for the weekend. On the first lap, when they've actually got some proper tyre temperature, there's nothing in it. 0.04 between Whincup and McLaughlin.
Yeah, so we're now genuinely seeing the crossover, and it's in that high 26, low 27 range. So the top 8 cars are all on a slick tyre. So that'll trigger everybody going into the pit lane, if they're not already on a slick tyre, to get one. And Winterbottom takes control of the field again by going back to position number 1. So we've got 18 minutes remaining, still a long time. And our attention will begin to focus more on those that progress. The top 10 are those that will jump the first portion of qualifying for Armour All, and then they'll leap into the second part of elimination qualifying. We'll have all that to come in our coverage later today. Todd Hazelwood's just jumped up into 9th position. Chaz Mostert just jumped up 15 spots into 5th position.
Remembering for this weekend, we've got a condensed format. It's effectively for supercars competitors, it's a 2-day format. And we saw the co-driver or the enduro driver session earlier today. Immediately, the drivers in this session have got to get their brain around the conditions, optimise their own performance, as McLaughlin now goes to the top with a 25 dead, roughly half a second faster than Cam Waters. But you've got to get your brain around it, and then at the end of this session, you've got to be in the top 10 to get your free kick into Q2. So the condensed format for the weekend puts pressure on everybody, and conditions like this tend to exaggerate it. Murph?
Yeah, they're very difficult to judge, aren't they, guys, when you especially looking out of the garages and seeing a little bit of sunshine, looking at what the rain is doing. I just watched the Erebus guys here, Penrite Racing on the 99 for Anton Di Pasquale. He just rolled in. He was one of the last guys, I think, to transfer over to slick tyres. And they just all went to work on each corner and removed a camber shim on each of them. So removed it, increasing the camber on all 4 wheels. I haven't seen anyone else do that. I think everyone else was on a dry setup. That made a slight little change for Anton, though. He's just about to roll on slicks.
Thanks for the update down there, Greg. The other aspect of this that needs to be taken into account in the toss the coin land of how do you get your car set up right for the weekend, this is the one and only session for today. We've got 16 and a half minutes remaining. Everybody's focus is on one lap at the moment because they're trying to get into this top 10 and they're trying to make peak speed. In fact, the drivers at the moment are they'll be doing everything to just stay within those tram tracks and do a lap time. As for trying to determine the last 0.01% of the behaviour of the car for the longer runs, for the 120 or 200 Ks, that's out the window at the moment. which means that they'll be tuning on the run. They'll be tuning within qualifying, or they'll be tuning within the race. So the teams that are going to be savvy to managing tyre pressure, ride heights, even little damper changes during the race, that might come to the fore later today. It's an interesting prospect because it would be really easy out there right now to just miss the setup window and perhaps by a long way. Now, Lee Holdsworth has fired off in the Botlow entry. Is he up at turn 6, 7?
4. That's where Mostert...
Oh, is it? Oh, it is. Yeah, so that's where Mostert went off several years ago. And is he going to be able to get out of there? Is it very deep, or is it sitting on top of the gravel? Because it is wet down there.
So he's just caught the wet line on the left. It is pretty deep, but it is sitting up now, isn't it? So it's actually rolled itself to a higher spot after it has got in there, and he's been able to get it out. So that's a good job, Lee Holdsworth.
And the irony was that getting it out came about 1 second after the red flag was triggered. So you can see the safety panels active around this racetrack. So a bit of a shame there for Lee, but at least he got out there, and I don't think there was any damage. So Shane Van Gisbergen replay now on the run here down to turn 3. Ooh, and the minute you come out of that dry line, look how slippery. So that's a couple of times that he's toured wide, and that's the view of turn 4 where you just saw Lee Holdsworth go off, and here's Todd Hazelwood on the outside of turn 5 as well. So a few of them exploiting the limits, and this is what happens the minute you come a millimetre out of that drier groove. There is no grip out there on a slick tyre, and when you think that the quick time's 23.2, they're still a good 4 seconds away from lap record speed, Craig.
Yeah, it is, and I think the sun's still trying to break through this cloud. You can definitely see a dry line through there. I was listening to the throttle application of all the cars. Cam Waters was really carrying good throttle between the transition of the left to the right, where everyone else was having a lift. So Cam, I'm not sure where he is. I think he's up the top, you guys said, but he's definitely carrying more throttle through this section of the track than anyone else.
He's right at the top. He's done a 23.2, Craig. He's got a third of a second on Fabian at the moment.
Yeah, look, there's no doubt about that. I think that this will probably be a good opportunity for teams also to accommodate for these conditions, and whether, as Murph said, that other teams now put on some camber. Because, look, with the time remaining, I'm looking at the skies, there's definitely no dark clouds, there's no rain coming around. So, look, it's going to be, the happy hour is coming.
Well, a bit of a blessing in some ways, unfortunately at the expense of Lee Holdsworth, but a little bit of a blessing because now at least you get a pause and a chat moment to have someone come in the window and discuss, well, what's it actually doing? But the other problem here is that the cars have not yet found peak load. So you've got to be careful you don't tune around a lap speed that's 4 seconds away, because the loads in the car in pitch and roll, so under brakes and on the throttle and in the mid-corner, are going to be very different when you look at that data at a 23 versus the data at a 19 or a 20.
100%.
And Neil, as you know, that peak load very much influences camber. We just heard Greg Murphy talking about them putting more camber on Anton De Pasquale's car. Scotty McLaughlin's car here, they've just put more camber on it. And Rick, can you point down in there and you can actually see that right rear tyre, sorry, kicked out a bit more because the dry conditions are going to put more load into the tyre. Now, a couple of other quick little observations. Look at the back of Shane Van Gisbergen's car here. In Formula One, they call it FlowViz. They put orange paint all over the vehicles when they're practicing. We've got mud on here, so we can actually see some of the airflow at the back of the car, and that tells me very disturbed at the back there, which we can expect from a touring car. Now, the other thing, this is not Mustang territory here, and here's a good little indicator. Look up here. Usually that's a big gap at the wing, top of the wing here. Scotty likes to run that wing right down. They've got that completely maxed out, and that tells us they're looking for every little bit of downforce they can on this circuit because there's so many slow corners. That, to me, is going to put them right back in the ball pack with the Commodore around this circuit, so I think we're in for a really mixed result this weekend.
I like it when you explain disturbed stuff like it. That's excellent. Hey, in part of my survey, are you a curb hitter at turn 1 or a non-curb hitter?
Well, you know, so much can be said about drivers and people about their dogs, first of all, right? You need to know at home that Mark's got a bull mastiff and Crompo's got a poodle. Oh. So when we go down there to turn 1, you can summarise these two guys. So Crompo, he's never hit the curb, right? He drove around in the centre of the road, right? Because he's a very considered guy. He wears a cardigan. He's got nice dark suede shoes with a compass in the bottom of them, seriously. Scafie, on the other hand, try and have a conversation after 2 beers with Scafie at the bar about parity. He's all or nothing. So he used to smash the curb. Me, finesse. I used to trim the curve, right? Look at Murph over here laughing. I did, look, in the background. I'll turn around here, there he is. I used to trim the curve. Great finesse, great skill. And we talk about sacrifice at that turn one, right? I did actually sacrifice some of my career for you guys. And you should thank me for that.
Well, how did you work that out?
Can you?
Yeah.
I'm in awe. I'm in awe of the dribble that just came out of his mouth then. It's like he's been preparing that for days. Days.
No, sure.
Some
It's
great
about
work.
sacrifice.
What about Neil's poodle? How's your poodle going?
Australia's new Minister for Nonsense, Mark Larkham. So we're going to have a very busy 13 minutes now to the end of the session. So Cam Waters, Fabian Coulthard, Chaz Mostert, 1, 2 and 3. The prospect that the track will remain dry through the balance. The top 10 will vacate out of qualifying 1 and jump clean into qualifying 2 in the elimination qualifying process. Extra importance around the session because there's going to be very few opportunities to tune the car with the condensed format this weekend. It puts a lot of pressure on the drivers and the teams, and the conditions are less than ideal. So the chances are this is going to line up nicely at the back end. Now Golding's gone out there straight off the bat and is showing fast sector splits. So is Whincup, so is Reynolds, and we're watching David through turn 10 here. They were the beneficiaries. Both cars 9 and 99 had a good solid test here last week, the week before in fact, and they got some value out of getting the mileage together that they needed, because if you go back 12 months, this was an ordinary weekend for David Reynolds, and it's kind of weird when you think that he's got a lot of experience at this racetrack, and he kind of shrugged his shoulders. We were discussing it this morning, and he's from Albury originally. He's like, I just can't get it together here, but he just did on that lap because he's gone to position number 1. But you look over the years, he's been here from an event standpoint 9 times, done 21 races, never had a podium, and that goes against the grain. Corley Jones just climbing back on. Rick Kelly, who was the winner on the Saturday last year. McLaughlin's on a good lap as well. 11 minutes remaining.
This is going to be great. Slade's currently fastest with 21.75. Then Reynolds, Hazelwood, great job. Deep Pasquale, Heimgartner, Rick Kelly comes up to 4th, comes up 6 spots. This is next 11 minutes is going to be absolutely enthralling. McLaughlin now does what he's done all year and gone to the top, 20.89. Scott Pye now comes up 19 spots. Nick Percat comes up to 2nd, up 23 spots. 11 minutes remaining.
Will Davison into 5th. Scott Pye and James Courtney were also at the test where there were 4 teams in total that had a run here. Van Gisbergen's just leapt up, so is Cam Waters. There's going to be a lot of this going on. So the benchmark time is McLaughlin. He's got 0.2 of a second now over Mostert on screen. Everybody's active on the racetrack. Nobody's in the pit lane now, and it's probably a case of set and forget. Bolt on that set of tyres and go and do what you can. So 20.8 in these conditions for McLaughlin is actually a pretty decent time considering the wet fringes. Anton De Pasquale's come up massively now into 4th position. Hazelwood's moved up further into 7th.
And the risk here is getting out of the groove. So if you miss that dry line, you're off the road. That outside of the road, still water everywhere, and clearly with the rain that we had overnight, all of the outfield is wet also.
You said something earlier in the day, and I pricked my ears up, Mark, and your boss, Fred Gibson, used to say this, that a good car is a good car in all conditions, whether it's wet, dry, or somewhere in between. They're proving that at the moment with 17 and 12. So McLaughlin and Coulthard, regardless of the grip levels, have got cars that look pretty well connected to the road. So 20.1 for Scott, a 20.9 for Fabian. So Scotty's just actually further improved that number. It's 0.8 of a second. Will Davison up into 3rd, in fact quickly eclipsed by Shane Van Gisbergen on screen. Jamie Whincup climbing the hill out of turn 2.
Whoa, whoa. He was out of control in the braking phase. He didn't even get to the corner. Then he slid it towards the corner, and then he missed the inside line and ended up dribbling out through that sand trap that we saw Van Gisbergen at. So we've seen both the Red Bull Holden Racing Team cars off at the same spot. David Cauchi, Grant McPherson, Mark Dutton, Garth Tander, all looking on.
Whincup recovered from that moment, though. Just then, as we were looking at the replay, went back out and did stitch a lap together, and he's done a 20.7 to be the best of the Holdens. So he's giving away 0.6 of a second. Mostert actually improved his time. He narrowed the margin down to half a second to McLaughlin. So Scott's time is holding up pretty well at the moment. This young guy's done a great job all year, and he's been in the top 10 for much of this session. He's just drifted in the last 2 minutes down to 15th, but there's been some very strong runs.
Oh, that almost sent him off. Oh, that was so close.
It hit the curb awkwardly on the exit of 5, just on that approach to 6, and he's actually still battling it even out of the right-hander up there at 7.
Yeah. So Percat now has come up to 5th. Lee Holdsworth goes into 9th. So Shane Van Gisbergen now is 10th. So he's on the cusp. Now he's come up 8 spots. So he's 2nd. Who's right on the cusp now? Lee Holdsworth. So McLaughlin, Van Gisbergen, Mostert, Waters, Whincup, Percat, Coulthard, Macaulay Jones. Excellent job, young Macca. Local racetrack. Dave Reynolds and Lee Holdsworth. That'll be remarkable if Macca can stay there in that top 10. Dave Reynolds now comes up 4 spots to be 5th. So now Macaulay Jones and Lee Holdsworth are 9th and 10th. Whincup comes up 1 spot to be 5th, just in front of Dave.
Those gentlemen that you saw on screen a few moments ago with the corresponding crew for Todd Hazelwood. It was Wes McDougall, the engineer, in the foreground, and Matt and Jimmy Stone in the background. So there's a vast amount of successful supercar experience in that mechanical and engineering group. McLaughlin's come back into the lane now and is about to rejoin. So it might be for another set of tyres or an adjustment.
Do you reckon they had a new tyre? They looked shiny, didn't they?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe another set, or maybe not at all. It might just be an adjustment. 0.2 of a second is the gap between Scott and Shane at the moment. Lee Holdsworth sitting in 10th, and the first 2 sectors of lap that he's just aborted were personal best. So this will be probably close to the last opportunity to either grab a tyre or have a good long hard think about what you want to tweak.
Yep.
And then you're going to have to send it and see what it's got. And then the idea for the front runners is to try and get that passage through Q1 and arrive in Q2. Today, because of the weird conditions, and you could be very clever after the fact with 20/20 hindsight here, you just never know whether that's going to be a benefit or in fact might hurt the other way. Because if it turns out that we get inclement weather, having some exposure to it in the first session could actually be useful.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting thought. I agree. Sometimes it won't be as negative as we think. The free kick that we often talk about may not be a free kick.
All fine and dandy when the conditions are straightforward, but it may not be the case this afternoon.
There's those loads we're talking about. When as soon as you get a dry track, you can see the amount of sidewall movement and the way the tyre contorts. We're using the super soft tyre, so the grip level is up. It tends to pull the footprint of the tyre in under the wheel. That was a great super slow-mo coming out of turn 2.
It does my head in how the tyre stays on the bead with that amount of load on it, and the punishing that they go through is quite extraordinary. Greg?
Yeah, just look at who's doing what with tyres. So just confirm for you, Scott McLaughlin is out on his practice 2 set. They're a used set, but they are getting ready in Shelby Power Racing now with a brand new one. Van Gisbergen's about to roll on a new set. So everyone's sort of just trying to work out the best of the moment. But I was watching before and listening. You guys may or may not have picked it up just down the front straight. Who was actually plucking 6th gear? A lot of guys still, and girls still holding 5th gear, but McLaughlin, I reckon, was the first one to go and start using 6th, and that just starts to tell you the confidence that I start to gain driving these cars. You know, plucking 6th gear, holding onto it for quite a long time while there's a lot still running in 5th on the limiter.
Yeah, they sound unbelievable down there when they stay in 5th gear. I know when you had your little run yesterday, you were grabbing 6th down there, Greg. We were watching.
I was so fast. I just had to grab 6th gear because it was, you know, on the limiter.
Just sounded right. Hey, quick question. When they put the other tyre set on McLaughlin's car, did they make any other tweaks, or was it purely just another tyre?
I'm pretty sure. I think Marco was looking in at that point, but I don't reckon they did. It was quite a quick change. I don't know, is he coming in now or not? We'll see if he throws those greens on.
All right, mate, we'll keep an eye on him because he's on a very good lap. His mid-sector, second sector performance is better than we've seen from anybody in the session. We'll have a listen here and see whether he does get to 6th, 3rd, 4th, 5th. That'd be no. So stayed on the limiter in 5th.
Do you want me to update
because he's boned the lap?
Well, that was the 19.8. That's not a bad lap. It's not far from lap record pace.
Copy, mate.
And that's on a scruffy tyre.
And still, there's enough water on the edge of the road that it actually impacts the entry line, especially when we're on board to watch him come onto the straight. There's a difficult turning point for the final corner for turn 12. So between 11 and 12, there's significant amount of water on the left-hand side, which makes you turn the car early for the corner.
And just a quick update on James Courtney. I was getting a little confused because I saw him in and out of the garage on different sets of tyres. He's roaded 2 sets of green tyres, and this is his 3rd set of greens that he's just jumped up the order into P7.
Thanks for the update. So James is on a personal best in this first sector, and his endurance co-driver Jack Perkins watching closely on the monitor from the garage. So Percat and Coulthard are still in the lane. Everybody else is active on the track at the moment. Remember, 25 cars this weekend with the wild card of Jack Smith. That's Scott Pye, who straight off the bat when he first went out in the session went up to P2, position number 2 for him. Pye's actually looking pretty good on this lap. He's done a personal best. Warren Love showed his experience in the co-driver session this morning to come out and be 3rd quickest straight away, and he's had a remarkable record at Mount Panorama in recent years. Anton pointing the wrong way where?
Down 7th.
You're on the car corner numbers today. Sharp.
Thanks, mate.
McLaughlin's come in. 3 minutes remaining. Pye's moved up to 4th on that lap that we saw the first couple of sectors of as we join Macaulay Jones. He is now using that little bit of cushion on the outside of turn 9.
He's 11th. Whoa!
Oh, he had the rears locked all the way in there, and then once they break traction like that and the car jumps sideways, especially when it stepped off onto the greasy, he was in trouble. Now Mostert may threaten the fastest lap here based on the numbers he's doing. He's in the final sector. McLaughlin, Van Gisbergen, Mostert. Here's the replay of Macaulay Jones. Locks the rears. He might have had the right rear on top of the white line there, which could have started that. Downshifting to 2nd, and Mostert does do a 19.6. So he's now got 0.2 of a second over McLaughlin. Remember, Mostert and McLaughlin have both got mighty Armour All pole form at this racetrack, but neither of them have had great success in conversion. They have won before, but not as much as you would expect a pole sitter to convert to.
So let's have a look, because Fabian Coulthard now is the man on the cusp. He is 10th. Jamie Whincup comes up to 5th. So Mostert, McLaughlin, Courtney, Van Gisbergen, Whincup, Pye, Waters, Reynolds, Percat, Coulthard. Then Richie Stanaway. Holdsworth comes up, and Fabian goes out.
Remember that Lee was a winner here for Erebus in the Benz several years ago, and the breakthrough win for that group. So he's got form at this racetrack. Oh, that's awkward for Richie Stanaway, and I think that that's going to be buried. Has it got some damage on it?
It looked like it made contact with the fence, doesn't it? Yeah, I think it's actually gone in pretty hard. So that's actually a real issue now as Rick Kelly comes up. Good job, up to 5th. Mark Winterbottom now also comes up. He goes to 10th, and the red flag comes out.
Oh, goodness, and it's 1 minute and 13 seconds away. That'll kill the energy in this session. There was no recovery from that now, because they'll come in, and by the time they roll back out, they won't get a lap started. What a shame.
So this is down at turn 6 into 7, and he's gone off very early. This is going to hit hard.
Oh, yeah, big time. So, yes, the answer to the question about is there damage on the back of it, big time. So here it is again in real time. So it actually didn't even hit the curb. It was the wet verge that got him. And at slow speed, that fence looks quite a long way away. But at that pace, you roll into that part of the racetrack, you're sort of hovering around the 140
just for the
to
information
150
of the teams,
with
only 1 minute, just over 1 minute remaining, we don't not propose to restart. We will not restart this session.
And Cam's race director Tim Schenken confirming what my suspicion was, that we won't get the rest of this session done. Now that means that Mostert, McLaughlin, Holdsworth, Courtney, Kelly, Van Gisbergen, Pye, Whincup, Waters and Winterbottom will all find their way through to the second portion of Armour All qualifying. Only missing out by a whisker, Will Davison, David Reynolds, Nick Percat, Fabian Coulthard. Here's the reason for the red flag again. Wet verge just trapping Richie Stanaway, the fast Kiwi. Backs the Boost Mobile, Holden Commodore off. I think the damage will be largely cosmetic, but it's still a pretty significant hit. It's going to keep that group in the garage busy between now and the start of Armour All qualifying. They'll hopefully get that car out and be ready in time.
Really awkward, wasn't it? So when he made the change of direction from the fast left to the right, the kink before turn 7, 5 to 6, he caught the left-hand side wet line outside that dry groove, and from then on there was no coming back. It was not able to get the next kink in terms of the right-hand section of road and couldn't hold it in there. Now, the big repercussion is that there's some serious players that have missed out in the 10. So have a look at some of these names. Davey Reynolds, Fabian Coulthard. I mean, they're nowhere near it.
There's confirmation of the top 10 for you. Significant because they moved through to the second portion of Armour qualifying. Mostert, McLaughlin, Holdsworth, Courtney, Kelly, Van Gisbergen, Pye, Whincup, Waters, Winter, Bottom. And then outside, as Mark was alluding, Davison, Reynolds, Percat, Coulthard, winner here on Sunday last year. These are people that you would have expected to have been able to be further up the front. And the reason will be that they've been trapped. They haven't got to complete their laps. There'll be tails up and down the pit lane of those that could have had they been able to complete the lap. We'll find out more. Here's Greg.
Yeah, thanks, Croppo. Fabian Coulthard having to make his way through all phases of the qualifying there was a tricky one. I think you were out there on a new set trying to warm up, obviously, and the red flag has curtailed that one.
Yeah, a bit of a bugger. We went out on set prior to this one, and the boys didn't quite tighten the wheel up properly, so I had a loose right front wheel, so we lost a bit of time in that. But the car's good, you know, it was good in the wet, it's good in the dry, but unfortunately with Stanaway putting it in the fence, we weren't able to do a time there at the end.
Really, again, tricky though at the start of it all, knowing what you should be doing and just waiting, I suppose, hoping that the rain is going to stop and you're going to get that dry line. It's always challenging though, isn't it, when you first go out on a slick tyre and you want to get ahead of the game, so you never know if it's quite right time.
No, that's right, and you know, there was one call there where it was like, is it good enough for slicks? I'm like, mate, no way. Take a braver man more than me to go to slicks that early, but yeah, it's definitely a fine line. You know, there's the right point and the wrong point to put the slicks on, but you know, I think we timed it pretty well. But just a little bit unlucky towards the end there.
Yep. Thank you, mate. We'll just try and grab Scott. I think he's disappeared somewhere, so we won't be able to grab him at the moment. We'll throw over to who's coming next.
That's me, Murph. Rick Kelly, you don't care, but you got in by about that much. It was just millimetre perfect.
Yeah, from a timing point of view, and that's probably luck more than better management. But even when you look at the sectors, the car's pretty quick. It's just a matter of putting a lap together. But there's absolutely millimetres on either side of the dry line out there. So the grip when it's dry, like right now in that line, is very high. But you just put your wheel just a smidgen out and it's ice again. So it's a risky little session there. You can see from how many cars went in the fence. But happy to be quick. We didn't test here last week, so to have the car on the money with such little dry running, I think is really good.
When we get to that point of do you go to a slick tyre, Simona got onto it pretty early. Whose sort of decision is that? You? Is that George? Who's sort of making that call?
George. It's George's decision. We went in sync with everyone there and just got the lap in time. As all the guys up the front, I think, ran a green slick, so that's good to compare to those guys. There's a couple of areas I need to improve on, and the tyre was better on the second run into turn 1 and 2. But overall, like I say, the car's pretty good, and it sets us up well for this afternoon.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you.
Chaz Mostert in a deep and meaningful there. Just look at this. I was just noticing what a beautiful setup the Tickford boys have got here in terms of all their computer analysis stuff. Chaz, quickest in that session, mate. Well done. Changing conditions. Some missed out. You didn't.
Yeah. Adam was lucky enough to give me enough time in the session, so he's pretty good at that. He's generally got a good structure around the session, and sometimes it's a bit better to go a little bit early, be a little bit out of sequence, and make sure you get your lap in than not. So yeah, very lucky. At the end of the day, you don't know who is exactly the quickest guy out there. It's pretty daunting out there when there's just one car width of a dry line, and it's still a bit wet in some other areas too. But overall, we'll still take that as a positive. Pretty good rollout, and we're through to the first session, so we'll take that.
Hey, Chaz, I'm actually not so sure. Just think about it. If it's changing conditions like this, I actually don't think it's going to be a disadvantage if you didn't get through, because you're going to get to run in damp changing conditions, get your car warm, get yourself up to speed. I actually think it may not be a bad thing.
Yeah, I think if you've got your whiteboard out of the guys that were in Q1 sessions so far this year, prime example, Waters at the last event at Perth was in trouble and in Q1, and he got all the way through to Q3. Obviously, he had a fast car underneath him to do it. But then, yeah, like you said, there is that benefit of knowing the track conditions a little bit more and on the ball a bit quicker than the guys in Q2 and Q3. You might catch a few snoozing.
Lovely to see you up there, mate. Now we go and see if we can just catch a word. If I duck out of here, excuse me, with Lee Holdsworth. Yeah, he's over here actually having a chat. Isn't that interesting? Just talking to Chaz Mostert, you might recall, we spoke to him a couple of years about this. He's just not a great driver now. He's very across what he does in the sessions, and that's a really critical part of being quick. Sorry, Lee, you've got quite a crowd here, mate. Everyone's quite impressed with that position 3, mate, and finally seeing some really nice performance from him, mate. You must be wrapped with that. Tough conditions.
Yeah, it was really tough conditions, but you know, the Achilles heel has been qualifying, not practice, so I guess that was half a quali session, but at least it means we're into the top sort of half of the field now. But Yeah, I mean, I need a good quali session today and tomorrow to get some results, because it's just too close to not be putting the thing up the front. It's we've fought our way back too many times now, and we've got to make our job a little easier. And it's good to roll the thing out quick, and we don't have too much to find, I don't think, for quali. Just need to put it all together.
Really nice to see you up the top of that television screen, mate. Well done.
Thanks, buddy. Hopefully this is the weekend, mate.
Scotty Mack, near the top of the timesheets again, but you were just saying how much you were loving those conditions and just trying to search for the grip on those on a green tyre.
Yeah, trying to find the grip is so much fun, and you sort of bomb it in there, you're just hoping it sticks, and it stuck, so you're like, oh, sweet, I got job security, so it's all good. So, overall the car feels good. It's a bit of a mixed bag, but we'll see how we go in the qualifying.
Yeah, straight through to obviously Q2. Fab's just missed out because of that red flag. It was tricky. You got to get the timing right still. I mean, you probably don't think about it all the time until actually something reminds you, like those situations about having to be out there at the right time and get the lap done.
Yeah, so the red flag with Holdsworth, we actually lucked out because we came in basically on that time, so we were able to put our tyres on straight away and go out with everyone else. So if we didn't have that, it would have been a bit awkward. So it was nice to get that time in, and and especially that 19.8, because I went on greens at the end to go a little bit quicker, but obviously, or get a read, and the red flag came out. So if I was 13th or 14th, I would have been pretty gutted.
What about changes? So, again, trying to learn through that session, from the damp, I don't know if you had